We're in Romans 8. We're going to be around verse 18, I think. So we're probably going to aim for 18 through 25. I don't know if we'll get that far or not, but there's just a lot going on in this chapter, and I don't want to rush through it. So first we're going to start talking about everybody's favorite subject, suffering.
Yay.
So, last week we talked about adoption and what that meant about being placed in God's family, being placed as a son. Basically what that meant was that you become a mature, responsible, safe son. That you're not just some child from outside the family being put into your family, but the fact is, it's really, the biblical definition really is that you are an heir, but you're just a child, and then you grow up to become a responsible son. So the Bible talks about being a child and talks about being a son, and they're sort of two different things. A child, of course, is irresponsible, immature, but a son is now responsible and mature. So the idea is that the Father is handing over responsibility and authority to his son to carry on the family business. That's the implication. So it says that we're going to suffer with him, but that's the only way we're going to be glorified with him. So we're taking on the sufferings of Christ, but the reward is going to be the glorification, to be glorified with Christ. Wow. So verse 18 kind of spells this out. He says, I consider that the suffering of this present time is not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed in us. That's kind of like a reality check, but it's full of hope. So, I mean, there's suffering for the present time, but there's glory coming. So that kind of keeps you motivated and keeps you going when the suffering is happening, right? I like how it says the suffering of this present time. It tells us that it's fleeting, it's going away, it's not forever. You know, one of the things, I know I haven't been here, but one of the things that you guys have been here on Wednesdays, the whole thing about demolishing strongholds, one of the biggest things about that is you get this in your head that's always going to be like this. Whatever that is, you know, if it's addiction or heartbreak or, you know, watching a child suffer, and, you know, whatever it is, what happened, one of the ways that a stronghold gets built in our life is that we think it's always going to be this way. It's never going to change. So we get trapped in that thing, whatever that is, and we don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, any hope on the other end, because it's always like this. I'm never going to get out of this. It's never going away. I always have to do this. I'll always be this. That always and never, those terms come into play, and it's not really true, because it's suffering of this present time. Time's transitional. It's moving somewhere. It's not ever going to stay that way. So there's a suffering for the present time, but there's a glory that's coming that will never go away. Glory is forever. Suffering is momentary. In fact, wow, I love that. I love how that happens. In 2 Corinthians, let me show you something here. 2 Corinthians 4, this kind of explains it here. 2 Corinthians 4, I'm not going to read all this, but 2 Corinthians 4, like 7, 8, 9, 10, those verses tells us that we're afflicted but not crushed, perplexed but not despairing, all these kind of things. 2 Corinthians 4:16, he says, therefore we do not lose heart, but though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day. Look at verse 17. For momentary light affliction, momentary light affliction.
Wow.
I mean, it almost makes you want some. Momentary light. Oh, that sounds very good, you know. I'll take a nice light glass of tea. You know, it's like for momentary light affliction, The old King James, I love how it's worded. It says, is working for us. This one says, mine says, producing for us an eternal weight of glory far beyond all comparison. So he's saying, no matter what suffering we're going through now, it's light and momentary, and it's actually not working against us. I'll never forget when I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, it's working for us.
That's the revelation.
Yeah.
Even in suffering, there's growth.
Yeah, there's something, God is working for us, even in the most horrible, painful stuff. I mean, it says right there, it's producing. So momentary light affliction actually produces an eternal weight of glory. I love how he compares the light affliction to eternal weighty glory. Right? Weighty. We're going to trade light stuff for something weighty, something more substantial. You know, we live our lives thinking that the material, temporal stuff is eternal. That's what we think. We think what we see and feel and touch is going to be here forever. But God's saying, no, that stuff is going away. What you can't see is eternal.
Wow.
Yeah, the very next verse is telling us that's what we do, right? So we fix our eyes on what is unseen. Now that sounds stupid. How are we going to fix our eyes on what is unseen? Well, it's not talking about these eyes. It's talking about the eyes of our faith. The eyes of our heart is fixed on unseen to these eyes things, right? So we walk by faith, not by sight. That's the whole point. And then the next chapter even says this tent we're in is going to fall apart and go away, but we're not going to be left without a body. We're going to have a new body. We're going to have an eternal body, an everlasting body that's going to line up with our everlasting spirit.
That's right.
And that's exactly what he's saying in Romans 8 here. He's saying that we have suffering now for the time, but it's not going to be forever. The glory is going to be revealed in us. What's in us, the inner man, is going to be revealed on the outside. And I mentioned this a week or two back, how the fall turned man inside out. So being born again is going to turn us outside in. It's going to turn it back right, where the inner man, the inner person, is going to be the one on full display.
Awesome.
So Paul said we look through a glass darkly right now. We see vague things and shadowy images, but the reality is that one day what's in here, I think it was C.S. Lewis said one time, he said, if we only really realized and could see the creatures that we deal with every day, and he's talking about people, he says, every person you deal with is not what you're seeing. He's saying you're dealing with a magnificent, glorious being every day that's veiled in this body. So if we could get our eyes to see that, then we would act differently around the people that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
I thought, ooh. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. These two caterpillars bump up against each other, but really it's two butterflies. But the caterpillar has to learn how to see that butterfly, even though it doesn't look visible yet.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Whoa, look at you. That's pretty cool. So what's the deal with suffering? I want to share 4 things, 4 kinds of suffering. This doesn't have to take a long time, but Romans 6:23. Does anybody know what that says? Anybody?
For the wages of sin, the gift of God is eternal life in Christ Jesus.
So the first kind of suffering we all have to deal with is the suffering from sin. Right?
Yep.
There's 4 basic kinds of suffering. 2 of them we don't have to deal with as a believer. 2 of them we're going to keep dealing with. So the first one is suffering for sin. We don't have to deal with that anymore. We don't have to suffer because sin's in our life. As a believer, sin's not supposed to be in our life. So that suffering should be gone. That shouldn't be around anymore. We shouldn't have to keep dealing with that suffering. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't have the fallen world and all kinds of other things, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about suffering for sin, from sin that's being produced through us. That should go away as a believer.
That's right.
The second kind of suffering is struggling and suffering from a lie that we're independent. And it's suffering from not seeing ourselves as having been crucified. And the way I describe this is not I, but Christ. So we suffer with that until we get established in that revelation that it's no longer I living, but it's Christ living. As long as I'm trying to live this Christian life, then I'm going to suffer, which is God's intention, because he intends that suffering to become so immense and so heavy that we finally cave under it and say, God, I can't do this. And God goes, bravo, now we're getting somewhere. Now you're starting to realize that I'm in you to do this. So the suffering for sin goes away. Suffering from walking around as though we're independent, trying to be a Christian, that can go away. That's the suffering of Romans 7 that we already went through. And Paul said, the thing I want to do, I don't do. The thing I don't want to do is what I keep doing. See, that can go away because there's now no more condemnation, and we're not living under that anymore. We're walking according to the Spirit, not according to law, not according to flesh. So suffering from sin in our life can go away. Suffering from living the Christian life can go away because I don't have to live it. He lives it. He's the only one that ever could live it. He's the only one that ever meant to live it. He's the only one that ever will live it.
Right.
The good news is we get to join into it because we're his body. We're joined to him, so he now lives it through us. He lives it, though. He's the one doing it. So the next kind of suffering is James 1:2 and 1 Peter 4:12 through 14.
I was literally just about to say that, like James 1:2, it goes along the same line.
Yeah. Now that one we'll never get away from because we'll always suffer from temptation. And James says, count it all joy when you go through trials and suffering. And the idea there is even as a believer, maybe not even as an unbeliever, because temptation, I didn't suffer from temptation as an unbeliever. I just did it. I wasn't like trying not to. I was just like, okay, chocolate cake, yeah. I shouldn't eat that. Oh, I don't want to eat that. No, I want to eat it, and I should eat it. That's how I lived. Why not eat it? If it feels good, do it. And if it feels really good, do it as much as possible.
That's right.
That was kind of my attitude. So really temptation, suffering for temptation or from temptation really is only for the believer. And that's a suffering that never goes away. We're going to be tempted until we lay our body in the ground and someone says, don't he look natural? That's when that ends. That's the only time that suffering will ever end. Wow, look at him. Don't he look natural?
Yeah.
So,
What are you trying to say?
he looked dead his whole life. So James 1:2 tells us to count it joy when we're suffering from trials. Here's another one I like. 1 Peter, he agrees with James. 1 Peter 4:12 through 14. It says, Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing, as though some strange thing were happening to you. It's like, I can't believe this is happening to me. He's saying, don't say that. Verse 13, but to the degree that you share the sufferings of Christ, keep on rejoicing, so that also at the revelation of his glory you may rejoice with exultation. Verse 14, if you are reviled for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you. That's what Paul said, right? The present sufferings can't compare to the future glory. So he's saying rejoice when you're insulted or made fun of or ridiculed for Christ's name, because the glory's coming. The Spirit of glory rests on you. That's pretty awesome. And then it goes on saying that as a believer, you shouldn't suffer as a murderer or thief and all that. That's not the kind of suffering we're talking about. As a believer, you shouldn't be engaged in that. So some people go, I'm just suffering for the Lord. No, you're suffering because you're an idiot. You're suffering because you're living in the flesh and you're acting like the world. That's why you're suffering. That's not suffering for Christ. There's a certain amount of reaping what we sow that does come back to us, isn't it?
Yes.
So we can't just claim it's my cross to bear. No, you're bearing it because you're mean and you're mistreating people. That's not suffering for Christ.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of suffering. So we're going to always suffer from temptation and trial. And then there's one other one, and this one doesn't have to happen. It's actually voluntary. But as a believer that is wanting to grow closer to Christ, it will be there. And that is suffering on behalf of others. It's called intercessory suffering.
What's the?
Colossians 1:24. There's probably many more, but I brought this up last week, I think. Colossians 1:24, the Apostle Paul, he said he rejoiced in his sufferings. He says, now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake. And in my flesh, I do my share on behalf of his body, which is the church, in filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions. So Paul said he rejoiced that he could suffer on behalf of the church, which is Christ's body. So we hold up our own end of the deal here by suffering for others. And that is what a mature, full-grown believer will do.
Right.
Because they're done with the sin suffering. They're done with independent mindset that thinks it's only their life and they're trying to live it. They know it's Christ living. And then they know how to deal with the suffering of temptation and trial because they've dealt with it. They've learned how to walk in the Spirit even though they feel like not doing it.
Right.
So now they've gotten off of themselves, and now everything in them is longing for Christ to be formed in others.
That's right. Wow, that's good.
So whatever it takes, whatever I got to go through for Christ to be formed in you, and that's what Paul spends a lot of time in his letters talking about. I've been shipwrecked, beaten, misunderstood, imprisoned, lied about. I almost drowned. I've been whipped. I've been beaten. I've been stoned. I've been left for dead. And it's all for you. It's all for the sake of getting the gospel message to you that I went through all this.
That's good.
I mean, that's what a parent would do, right, for their child. And that's what Paul told the Galatians. He said, I feel like I've wasted my time on you. He said, I'm in labor, like a woman in labor, longing for Christ to be formed in you.
Yeah.
So what he's saying is I long for you to grow up into your understanding of who you are and who God has made you to be. And that you would start walking in what he's called you to walk in. I mean, that is the desire of anybody that's a believer that's growing in their understanding, right? I mean, that's what our desire is. You want your children to grow up, be responsible citizens, be able to pay their bills and not be in debt and not be owing people and not to be depending on everybody else, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal of the natural child for a parent to grow. You know, look at my son, look at my boy. You know, he's running his own business, paying his bills, taking care of his family and his neighborhood and giving to the needy and whatever they do, right? That you're like, I'm proud of him. So in Romans 8, this is where we're at. This is because he's saying that there's going to be a certain level of suffering no matter what, but it doesn't have to stay that way. It won't stay that way forever. Romans 8:19 says, the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. Everything in creation is going, where are you? Where is my boss? Where is my ruler? Where is my leader? Creation is in a turmoil. The animal kingdom, the plant, the people are going, the planet is warming up and it's all mankind's fault. In some sense, they might be right. If man would get in line with who he is, then a whole lot of other things will straighten out.
Good point.
I don't know if you've ever seen the show that used to come on the National Geographic Channel. It's called The Dog Whisperer.
Yeah.
And we don't have a dog, but I love this show. The guy was amazing how he dealt with people's pets. People would have trouble with their dogs, and so they would call him in, and he would come in, and he would work with the pet, but mostly he worked with the owner.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, the problem wasn't with the dog at all. The problem was with the owner. And he would teach them that you have to be the pack leader to this dog. The reason your dog is acting out and won't walk properly on its leash and gets into the garbage and tears things up all the time is because you aren't being the pack leader. So he would teach the person how to deal with the dog. And then when the person started walking in this authority over the dog would just obey. It would just start to come into line. All of creation is out of sorts waiting for its pack leader. which is man. God gave man dominion over the planet. Well, the fall came in and thorns and thistles grew up and animals started eating each other. Fear of man came into the animal kingdom, and now we're getting eaten by them. So everything is groaning, longing to be set free from its uneasiness, its chaos that has come about because man has fallen. So it's sort of like the Humpty Dumpty thing, isn't it? Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. I mean, all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't fix it, but the king can. Right? The king can fix it. The king can put Humpty Dumpty back together. He can reconstruct what the planet was meant to be like, and that's what he's going to do. But he's going to do it through you.
He gave us
Yeah.
the job
Yeah.
to go and tell them. If
Yeah.
we're not doing our job, how can we expect any of them
Yeah.
to
Yeah, he's going to do it through us.
Yeah.
That's right.
We're not doing our job, which is part of why they're not.
Yeah. Well, and why though? The big part of the reason we're not is because we don't even know who we are. We don't know who we are, and we don't know what our job is. And that's what this is kind of trying to set straight. So let me just read a few more verses here. So verse 19 tells us the longing of the creation is eagerly waiting for the revelation or the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. And not only this, but also we ourselves, having the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves, waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our body. For in hope we have been saved, but hope that is seen is not hope, for who hopes for what he already sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, with perseverance we wait eagerly for it. Wow. So all of creation is on its tiptoes, waiting for man to be put back into his rightful position as ruler over this planet. In Isaiah, it gives us a glimpse about the new heaven and the new earth, and it says that if you die before the age of 100, people will think you're cursed. It says that you're going to plant vineyards and get to enjoy them. You're going to build houses that other people won't be living in because you'll get to live long enough to enjoy it. And it says the little child will play by the snake hole and you won't have to worry about it. And the wolf will lie down with the lamb. And cows and lions will eat grass together. Whoa. Because that's the point. They won't be eating each other. That's part of the fall. That was not the intention. So when it's all brought back and restored, no more locked doors. No more fear of someone stealing your stuff. No more concern about your child getting eaten or run over by a car or getting eaten by a wild animal. Everything's going to be set straight.
That's so great.
And that's where we're heading, right? So our role today, what happens I think a lot of times for us is we have so much stuff that's messed up within us that it takes us so long to get our own heart and mind in order that we can't even begin to reach out to help the rest. You know, I mean, so there's a time frame where I got to deal with my addictions. I got to deal with my attitude. I got all this fallen stuff within me that's got to be flushed out, and I got to come to see myself as who I really am. And then it's like, oh, and then when you do, you can't wait to tell other people who they are. And reinstitute them and be a part of telling them you don't know who you are.
Yeah.
You are a son of the Most High.
I think there's a problem that arises with that is people think that they have to fix themselves first before they can. I mean, I know it's my own life, like that was part of it. Whenever I asked the Lord, through my heart in 2014 in Christian County Jail, I got out and well, I still got so much wrong with me. He's not going to want me like this. I had this misconception. And that's ultimately what it boils down to.
It's actually that lie, that you can do it yourself. And
Well, and what it really is based on is we have an imaginary super Christian version of ourselves.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to. So the quicker we get rid of that, the quicker we'll walk in who He's really already made us to be.
Yeah, that's right.
We have it really backwards.
Yeah.
We're looking for
Bring
something.
all that to them first.
Yeah. Well, to be born again means you're ready
Yeah.
in that moment. It's not even about what you do or don't know per se. It's about who you are, and the knowing kind of comes as you walk in it. The prodigal son story has always been interesting to me like this, because he was a son. He wasn't in the pig pen and then came home to become a son. He was already a son. So what happened was he got a revelation. This blew me away when I saw this. His revelation wasn't about who he was. His revelation was about who his father was. That was the real revelation, and that's what made him go home. Oh, wait a minute. I'm not a pig pen guy. No, that's not what happened. He said, my father has slaves living better than me. What he said was, my God, my father is so awesome. Why am I in this pig pen? He didn't say, well, I'm a son of God. No, he said, God is my father. My father is awesome.
Yeah,
I think I'm going to go to him.
that's right.
So his revelation wasn't even really about who he was. It was about how awesome the father was, that the father was employing slaves that lived better than a son. So he said, I'll say, make me a slave. And the father didn't address that at all. Immediately made him a full-blown son again with full authority. After he blew it all, he gave him all the authority and privilege and power back in an instant.
Yes.
He didn't have to sleep in the barn for a couple months to prove himself.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We make people sleep in the barn for a while. I just don't know if I can trust you for.
Yeah.
And God's going, no, my son was dead. He's alive again. I'm going to give him my signet ring. I'm going to give him my robe, my sandals. This boy is my boy, and he is now adopted. He's placed as a full-blown authority figure in my household. He has all the rights that he always had and even more, because now I can trust him.
That's right. That's right.
Now he's safe.
Yeah. Wow.
Because he's gone through the suffering, and he's come out realizing he can't do it. It's so great.
I know
That
it.
story is so amazing. Well, that's what 2 Corinthians 5 tells us. It says that God was in Christ reconciling the world unto himself. And here's my favorite part. Not counting their trespasses against them.
So, Louis, is that the kind of suffering that you're talking about as believers? Is like, I just speak on for me, right? You know, you try to get people and teach them the gospel and show them the gospel, and it's just like they're just not getting it, right? So your heart, literally, like my heart breaks that they're
Yeah.
not getting it. I just like, you want to grab them and shake them. I'm like, why can't you get this? You know,
Yeah.
just they don't get it. So is that the suffering that you're talking about? Is I got
That's part of it.
continue to suffer?
Yeah, part of it is, I think, yeah. And that can go on and on and on. You know, what I was thinking, I told Tracey last week we were leaving here, and I said, you know, if you think about a woman giving birth, some women, when they have a child, it's like, oh, there's a pain, bloop, there's a child. I mean, it's like that. In other women, it's like hours and hours of labor.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with the Spirit.
I think so too.
That some people, you're thinking, you should have been born by now. You just want to get in there and have a C-section. Like, let me just take this, let me just make you born again. I'm gonna make you born again. But you can't. That's God's business.
Yeah.
I know I've been ministering to an old friend of mine, and he knows the word, but he don't want to hear that God's going to do it in him because he's got all these scriptures to back him up, and it's just painful to try to explain something to him when he thinks he knows everything.
Mm-hmm.
This is painful.
Yeah.
It is, you know, why are you walking around?
Yeah,
You know, I'm a child of the King. I'm going to smile and be happy no matter what situation I'm in because I know who I am. But you need to come out of there. Yelling me.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's Brian that wrote that book. Some of you were here, and I don't know if he did this or not when he was here, but one of my coolest illustrations I'd ever seen was he said a lot of Christians are in the birth canal.
Yeah.
You know, he said, and they got their feet and her hands just planted.
All right.
And God's saying, pushing, and he going, I'm not going. And he's just like, nope. Putting the brakes on.
Yeah.
I am not going. And I think that's kind of, it comes to me every now and then. It's like, oh, you're going, buddy.
When
Because you
somebody
can't
knows
stay
the
in
word
there.
like that before,
Yeah.
it's even harder because they're so religious,
Yeah.
you know, and he said, I had a ministry and, you know, my life has changed and I'm not got that no more. And I said, maybe it wasn't your time to have that. Maybe God had other things to do in you before he can give you the fullness. You
Yeah.
ain't lost anything.
Yeah.
You're just waiting for the right time, for
Yeah.
God's time, not yours.
Yeah.
Because you ran out there and, oh, I'm gonna do it, you know. It's just like me and mine with the jail and stuff. I want it. As soon as I got out, I wanted to get back in the jail, you know. But it wasn't for me yet. God had to prepare me for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a maturing thing. There's a, coming to a realization thing. There's a trustworthy thing, you know. Interesting. So sharing the gospel, you can, like Brandy was saying, that's immediate. You know, you see people in the scripture, the woman at the well,
Yes.
she got a revelation and went running into town to tell it. Now, yeah, and had the whole town coming back with her to meet the guy. So, I mean, she was a successful evangelist. I don't know how much authority she needed to have over other believers at that moment.
Yeah, but I
That was a
think-
kind of obedience that you can't not do. I mean,
But I
when your
think-
life gets transformed, you're going to tell somebody.
Well, yeah, but sometimes we get ahead of ourselves instead of waiting on God's time.
Yeah.
You know, he has to.
All right, now, here's the other thing that I woke up this morning. I don't know what time it was, but Romans 8 popped into my head, and what came to me was creation was subjected to futility. That's the phrase that came to me this morning. So it's Romans 8:20. And I thought, what is that really saying? So look what this verse says. Romans 8:20, it says, for the creation, now some Bibles might say creature, but it says creation in mine was subjected. I think what it's saying is that all of created stuff, God's uncreated, everything else is created. So everything that is created, I think it's encompassing all of this. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it. All right, so my first thought was, what does subjected mean? What is, sometimes you got to think, what do these words mean? What does futility mean? What does subjected mean? So, subjected. I looked up the word subjected, and according to the Strong's Concordance, this is the only place in the entire Bible that word is used. Now, the word subject might be in other places, but subjected, this actual word is only used one time in the Bible. So it says it means to subordinate, to obey, be under obedience, put under, subdue unto, submit self to. So, when God created man, he put all of creation under him. Creation was subjected to Adam. In the fall, we became subjected to creation. So man has now found himself in time, space, matter, decay, right? That's where we're at. That's what the fall is. The fall is decay and crumbling back to dust, temporary. All of that is now. What time is it? What time is it? What time is it? What time is it? Do we have enough time? What time is it? I'm supposed to be there. What time is it?
Oh, no, I'm late.
We're subjected to it. John likes to say, I'm not into time, man. And I mean, ultimately, we have a timeless, eternal God living in a very temporal, decaying body.
Wow.
Yeah, this is not what we were designed originally to be, but somebody subjected us to it. Who subjected it to it? Who subjected us to it? Look at this verse. The creation was subjected to, now futility means meaninglessness, vanity, emptiness. That's basically futility. In other words, there's no real purpose. There's not going to be any gain in it. Futile. Your attempts are futile. Me trying to jump from the ground to the top of this building are futile. It's not happening. That is a practice of futility. So it's, what's that? Yeah, well, now that's different, but it's probably still futile in my case. But broken bones, now that probably would be the result. So I'm going to say it's futile. So creation was subjected to meaninglessness, pointlessness, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the... All right, now, the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament was written by Solomon, the wisest man in the world. And over again, he says, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And then he says, under the sun. Everything under the sun is pointless and meaningless. And then the whole book of Ecclesiastes, except for a couple of verses at the very end, is demonstrating to us what life and creation and man and everything means or doesn't mean apart from God. And he's saying, I had vineyards, I had women, I had music, I had architecture, I had books like you could never imagine, and it was all pointless, and it was futile, and it had no meaning under the sun. So he's basically saying, if that's the way you're going to live, then working and enjoying your work and all that is great, but you're just going to die like a dog. That's all you're going to look forward to. I mean, that's what it says. You're just going to die. The dog dies, you die. There's no difference in the two. I mean, so time and temporal and fleshy and creation, all of it is transitional, and it is going away. And what this is telling us is that God put man under this for a reason, in hope that we would be delivered from it. It sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? But you know, all through the Old Testament, God put Israel under a system of animal sacrifices, priests, temples, Sabbath keeping, festivals, new moons, holidays, circumcision, diet laws, all of that stuff. God put all of Israel under it, never once dreaming that it would fix what their problem was. But he subjected them to it anyway. He subjected them to it in the hopes that they would get wore out, wore down, overwhelmed by it, so that they might cry out and receive Christ and be renewed to their eternal or everlasting state. Without that suffering and time-based pressure, what time is it? I'm so sore. I'm so tired. I can't do it. I can't lift this. I can't go on. God. So he subjected us to this in the hope that we would be liberated once and for all from it. On the surface, you're thinking, well, why didn't just God liberate us? Well, because he made us in his image, and he wants us to play a part in this. And the only way that happens is we agree with him. Now, let me show you a verse. Look back in Psalm 103:7. This verse comes to me a lot. Psalm 103:7. Comes to me a lot, even though I don't know what it is by heart. I know what the verse says, but I always have to look it back up to find where it's at. Psalm 103. Now, think about this. This is all under the context of adult, mature, responsible, safe sons. That's what he's after. And he's wanting us to grow up, right? So Psalm 103:7. Somebody read that verse.
He made known his ways unto Moses, his acts unto the children of Israel.
Ooh. So God picks Moses to help the children of Israel come out of their bondage in Egypt. Moses is the Christ Messiah figure, right? He's the deliverer. He's the teacher. He's the Messiah in the story. He frees them. Moses met with God face to face. That's what the Bible says. Children of Israel had to stay away from the mountain down below. Stay back. You'll all get killed. There's an electric fence here. Don't come any closer. Moses He's up there talking face to face to God. And it tells us here that Moses knew God's ways, but the children of Israel only knew his deeds. Young, immature Christians need miracle after miracle, and they are looking for provision. They're looking to be blessed. I'm needy. I don't know who God is. I just need something to eat. I don't know who God is. I just need my diaper changed. The children of Israel were fed miraculously. Their clothes didn't wear out. The cloud by day, the fire by night. They were rerouted not to get into fights with enemies because God was treating them like infants, like little children, because that's what they were. Moses, on the other hand, he knew God's ways. And that is what we're after. The creation can never, ever find its way back into its right place until mature, safe sons start knowing God's ways. If we're just chasing after a blessing, then we just know his deeds. But when we know his ways, we walk in his ways. You see what I'm saying? So there's a place when we know God. It's a personal relationship with God. It's not a relationship to God through somebody else. The children of Israel only knew what Moses was telling them and doing. You go find out and you tell us and then we'll do it. And it's not wrong to be immature Christian. It's wrong to stay there forever. Right? It's not wrong. I mean, it's not wrong for a baby to need their diaper changed. They need their diaper changed. But at a 42-year-old man living with his mom and dad, still wearing a diaper? Ooh, that's a problem. That's a real problem. So at some point, if you own a business and you want your son or daughter or sons and daughters to grow up and take over that family business, you might have 3 or 4 children. You're going to look at those children and you're going to say, well, I know he's ready, but I know they're not. And they're going to have all kind of trouble because he is ready. And when I hand over the reins to him and they're going to be having to be submissive to him, they're not going to like that. I wish you would all just grow up. I wish you would all grow up and know my heart about my business.
Yeah.
There's a part, if you guys hadn't seen that, Paul, Apostle of Christ or whatever, if you get a chance to see that movie, I would say watch it. It started out for me really slow, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. It's just kind of slow moving at the beginning, and it's not like bombs exploding. It's not that kind of movie. But Paul is in prison in this movie in Rome, and he's waiting to be martyred. He's waiting to have his head cut off. Well, there's believers coming in to deal with him, trying to get him to help them make decisions. And there's one part in the movie where he says, I can't tell you that. And he just has a total hands-off approach. Because some of the Christians are saying, we need to flee. Other Christians are saying, no, we need to stay here. And they're looking for Paul to tell them what to do, and he will not do it.
Yeah.
I thought that was so great. He's like, you gotta follow the Spirit. You gotta let the Spirit show you what you gotta do. And because he was an old man, he's like, look, I'm about to lose my head. I'm done talking to you and telling you what to do. I got some stuff I got to deal with myself. You need to figure this out. And sometimes that's the greatest lesson or the greatest teachers that we have are the ones that let us flounder and the ones that let us mess it up, because you got to stand up at some point. Right?
It's that individual relationship people are striving for the Christians to get, to not feel like they have to come through him, go straight to the Father, they're supposed to.
Yeah, and it's tough. It's tough sometimes. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't ask other people their thoughts on things, right? I mean, the Bible clearly says that you have lots of wise friends will make you wise. I mean, that's a good thing. But when it comes right down to it, it's on you.
Kind of like letting a child or a grandchild, let them go and make their mistakes so they can figure it out.
That's right.
Yeah.
And believe you've instilled in them what they need. They just have to learn how to operate in the Spirit that's in them.
See, and the Spirit will tell you all things, right?
Yeah. Lead you into the truth, yeah.
So-
Comfort you,
So when you're messing it up, you remember your mom telling you, so then you just do, Mom, you'll never believe what happened. It worked.
I heard you saying, you know better than that.
That's right. I heard your voice, and it misaimed her way.
So he's relating this to a birth, right? I mean, that's what he's relating this to, that creation is longing to give birth to what it's meant to be, you know. That's just great. So, I didn't finish my definitions here. All right, the word subjected means to subordinate, to obey, be under obedience, put under, subdue, unto, submit self to. So then there's two root words that make up this word subjected. One of them means under, and then it says or time. Then it says inferior position or condition. So God has put us into an inferior position or condition by placing us into this futility of material, time-based living. Then the other half of this word means to arrange in an orderly manner. Addict. A-D-D-I-C-T. Appoint, determine, ordain, or set. So what got me about this, and I'm not going to turn to all this, but in Colossians and in Galatians, Paul says in both of those letters, basically you have been freed from living according to traditions. You're no longer under the rule of new moons and festivals and Sabbath keeping.
There you go.
Your diet is no longer the issue. That's not the issue. In Galatians 4, it says that although we were children, we were put under authority of supervisors or overseers until the time set by the Father. Now, so you have different examples. The Old Testament, you have the children of Israel under the law and Moses and the priesthood and the animals, right? All of that is what's keeping them. And Paul calls it a schoolmaster that led us to Christ. So when we get to Christ, Christ is born in us. We're placed as a son. We're placed in full authority in that moment. But then we have to get our minds renewed to understand what that means. But we are now adopted and placed as a son. We no longer need the authority of laws, traditions, new moon, Sabbath keeping, diet laws. You know, when I was a kid, I'd be like, my mom, you can't eat your cake. You got to eat your dinner, then you eat your cake. And then as an adult, I'm thinking, I could eat all the cake I want.
That's right.
But I won't. I won't do that. I still eat my cake after I eat my dinner. Why is that?
Because you're going to ruin your dinner.
Because it doesn't make sense to eat the cake. I mean, because you can't do that. That can't work like that. A little child thinks that way.
That's right.
Don't want to be so full you can't eat it after, yeah. But you get the point. You know what I'm saying? So he's put us under the authority in an inferior position. He's put us under a subordinate thing, being creation, and a condition. And he's put us under an arrangement of laws and traditions and all of that stuff, but that's no longer where we are now. That's where we are until we come to faith, until we get born again. All that weight and heaviness of religion, religiosity, all that stuff you're talking about, that's supposed to be there, and it's supposed to cause us to want to be birthed into the freedom of the sons of God. So sometimes it takes more law, more law. You think, well, man, they're legalistic. Not enough yet. They're not legalistic enough because they seem to be doing okay. I think they need some more law. I think they need some more tradition. I think they need some more things to do and to carry. So they'll be open when Jesus says, all who are weary and heavy laden, come to me and find rest. Wow. So he put us here in hope that we would be fully delivered. You know, when someone's an addict, they go into rehab, the person that is there in the rehab don't want to see them back. They want them fully delivered.
Thank you, Lord.
They want them fully delivered. Now, if you want to see them back, then you got a wrong motive. There's a wrong motive there. We went to the prison this last time we went, and there's a guy in there. He's been in there for, I don't even know how long he's been locked up. He knew me from the jail down here, but he's been up there, and he's been faithful. Every month he's in there. He came up to us this last time. First thing he said was, getting out Wednesday. And I always tell them, this is the one church service I am so glad to never see you again.
That's right.
Because I don't want you in prison.
Right.
As much as I like to tell you the truth, I don't want to do it in here if I can help it. Yeah. If I had my way, the place would be shut down. There wouldn't be anybody there. We wouldn't need it anymore. But sometimes we get subjected to prison in hopes that we'll be delivered.
That's right.
And we won't be the same person when we are. See, it's no different than God putting us into creation. Same idea, right? Same model. Yeah. There's a certain amount of bondage that has to happen in our life before we can walk in freedom. Period. That's it. Children of Israel were in Egypt for all them years. God planned to deliver them, but they had to be there first. All right. We'll pick up here next week. And Frankie will be glad to know we're about halfway through Romans 8. It's only taken 4 Sundays to get there. Next week, we'll probably talk about hope. And everybody needs that.
Yeah.
Somebody want to pray for us?
Father, we just thank you for the word of God that
Yes, Lord.
your, Louie allows you to be manifested through him, and that he speaks the truth because you're speaking through him, Father. I thank you for allowing us to be vessels, Lord, and to be taught by someone who knows you, Father, and knows who they are in you. Lord, I ask for a hedge of protection around the word today, that it doesn't go, it's not stolen from us, and that we can walk in truth today, Father. I thank you for the word each and every day, Lord. And I thank you that you are my Father, and that I know who I am because of you. And we just ask blessings on everyone in here, and go out and have a blessed day in Jesus' name.
Thank you, Lord. Amen.